Hey everyone, welcome to Collards Conversation. This is a monthly free virtual gathering hosted by TheLRoom. And this month we're going to spend some time honoring Coretta Scott King, the Queen in front of the King. And we are going to go through some videos of her life and learn a little bit about the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement. This is our agenda for tonight. We're going to be mostly watching videos of Coretta Scott King and some of her loved ones, as well as a tribute. And at the end, we will leave time for reflections. This is a photo of the memorial march after the assassination of Dr. King. I'm going to give the mic over to Eddie, who's going to be talking through some of the next slides that you'll be seeing.
And this is when President Reagan made Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a national holiday. And this is a statement that was made by Bernice King on Twitter in 2022. I will let you all read it, but as you honor my father today, please remember and honor my mother as well. She was the architect of the King legacy and founder of the King Center, which she founded 2 months after Daddy was assassinated. Without Coretta Scott King, there would be no MLK Day. This is at the homegoing for Coretta Scott King. So Maya Angelou's reading.
I open my mouth to the Lord and I won't turn back, no. I will go. I shall go. I'll see what the end is gonna be. In the midst of national tumult, in the median of international violent uproar, Coretta Scott King's face remained a study in serenity. In times of interior violent storms, she sat, her hands resting in her lap calmly, like good children sleeping. Her passion was never spent in public display. She offered her industry and her energies to action toward righting ancient and current wrongs in this world. She believed religiously in nonviolent protest. She believed it could heal a nation mired in a history of slavery and all its excesses. She believed nonviolent protest religiously could lift up a nation rife with racial prejudices and racial bias. She was a quintessential African-American woman, born in the small town repressive South, born of flesh and destined to become iron, born a cornflower and destined to become a steel magnolia. She loved her church fervently. She loved and adored her husband and her children. She cherished her race. She cherished women. She cared for the conditions of human beings, of Native Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans. She cared for gay and straight people. She was concerned for the struggles in Ireland, and she prayed nightly for Palestine and equally for Israel. I speak as a sister of a sister. Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated on my birthday. And for over 30 years, Coretta Scott King and I have telephoned or sent cards to each other, or flowers to each other, or met each other somewhere in the world. We called ourselves chosen sisters. And when we traveled to South Africa or to the Caribbean, or when she came to visit me in North Carolina or in New York, we sat into the late evening hours calling each other girl. Now, it's a black woman thing, you know. And even as we reached well into our 70th decade, we still said, girl. I stand here today for her family, which is my family, and for my family and all the other families in the world who would want to be here but could not be here. I have beside me up here millions of people who are living and standing straight and erect and knowing something about dignity without being cold and aloof, knowing something about being contained without being unapproachable. People who have learned something from Coretta Scott King. I stand here for Eleanor Traylor and for Harry Belafonte, and I stand here for Winnie Mandela. I stand here for women and men who loved her. Dinky Romilly. On those late nights when Coretta and I would talk, I would make her laugh. And she said that Martin King used to tell her, you don't laugh enough. And there's a recent book out about sisters in which she spoke about her blood sister. But at the end of her essay, she said, I do have a chosen sister, Maya Angelou, who makes me laugh even when I don't want to. And it's true, I told her some jokes only for no mixed company. Many times on those late after evenings, she would say to me, sister, it shouldn't be an either or, should it? Peace and justice should belong to all people, everywhere, all the time. Isn't that right? And I said then, and I say now, Coretta Scott King, you're absolutely right. I do believe that peace and justice should belong to every person, everywhere, all the time. And those of us who gather here, principalities, presidents, senators, those of us who run great companies, who know something about being parents, who know something about being preachers and teachers, those of us, we owe something from this minute on, so that this gathering is not just another footnote on the pages of history. We owe something. I pledge to you, my sister, I will never cease. I mean to say, I want to see a better world. I mean to say, I want to see some peace somewhere. I mean to say, I want to see some honesty, some fair play. I want to see kindness and justice. This is what I want to see, and I want to see it through my eyes and through your eyes, Coretta Scott King. I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back, no. I will go. I shall go. I'll see what the end is going to be. Thank you.
I don't think that my husband, although he said he was going to go back south and fight to change the system, and he was thinking about not just in Alabama or in Georgia, but he was talking about making our society more inclusive, changing the system so that everybody could participate. Although he talked about that, at that time, we never dreamed that we would have an opportunity, that we would be projected into the forefront of the struggle as we were. We were just going to work from, as he said, a Black Baptist church pulpit. That was the freest place, in the society at that time. But we had no idea that what God had in store for us. And I do believe it was a divine intervention that we were thrust into the forefront of the struggle.
After we married, we moved to Montgomery, Alabama, where my husband had accepted an invitation to be the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Before long, we found ourselves in the middle of the Montgomery bus boycott, and Martin was elected leader of the protest movement. As the boycott continued, I had a growing sense that I was involved in something so much greater than myself, something of profound historic importance. I came to the realization that we had been thrust into the forefront of a movement to liberate oppressed people, not only in Montgomery, but also throughout our country, and this movement had worldwide implications. I felt blessed to have been called to be a part of such a noble and historic cause.
Well, first of all, I was extremely excited and about what was going on, because this was something that had never happened before, and I knew this was history making. And I also knew that it was not only happening in Montgomery, but it was, the impact of this was really much further, much more extensive than Montgomery, because during the Montgomery boycott, we heard that there was a boycott in Johannesburg, South Africa, of buses, and also there was one in Mobile and in Tallahassee, so it was like it was spreading. But we also knew that the struggle was much bigger than a boycott. It was about the injustices in our society. It was about changing the society in such a way and changing the laws of the government locally, and certainly nationally. We had to create new laws to protect us and protect the rights once they were won. And we even experienced what was like modern day miracles when things happened, like when the Supreme Court had ruled on bus desegregation. We were in court that day because, excuse me, the city of Montgomery was having a hearing and was trying to outlaw our transportation system. And if it had, maybe the people would have gotten tired and gone back to the buses. And my husband was very worried. And I said to him, you know what? I think that by the time we go to court and by the time the judge rules, that the Supreme Court will have ruled. And we felt that if the Supreme Court ruled, it would be in our favor. And that was my consolation. And sure enough, while we were in court, Associated Press, an Associated Press reporter handed a note to my husband, and it said, the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled today that bus segregation in Montgomery is unconstitutional. So that ended the court session. So it was that kind of thing, an intervention again, that helped us to realize that we were doing the right thing, and you continue to do that. And that, more importantly, that we had been called, I had been called personally to be in Montgomery at that time, because I had always sought my purpose. As a teenager, I began to think about what my life was going to be like. And going to college, that was one level. Going beyond there was the next level, going to prepare for a music career. But when I got to Boston, I realized another reason and for me being there. And then I wondered why Martin Luther King Jr., a minister that I didn't think I would ever marry, a minister, and then he was going back south. I wanted to go back south, but I wasn't prepared to go at that time because I had to finish my work. And finally, in Montgomery, and then things began to happen. And the house was bombed. So I did a lot of soul searching after that and tried to remember, try to think back of how I got there. And I realized that all my life I had been being prepared for this role, and that we were supposed to be there in Montgomery. And it was a great feeling of satisfaction because I realized that I had found my purpose. I realized when Montgomery started that this was probably the reason we were called to Montgomery. After my house was bombed and of course all the threats on my husband's life, on my life too, I realized I could have been killed as well because I was in the house when the bomb hit the front porch with my young baby. And the callers had been calling, and they said that they were going to bomb our house, told my husband they were going to bomb his house and kill his family if he didn't leave town in 3 days. Of course, he didn't leave town in 3 days, and they did bomb the house. So knowing that they meant what they said, because they actually did bomb the house, that the bomb was not strong enough to destroy the house. But if it had been, then, that would have been very, very sad for all of us, certainly for me and my baby and my husband. But the fact is that I had to deal with the fact that if I continued in the struggle, I too could be killed. And that's when I started praying very seriously about my commitment and whether or not I would be able to stick with my husband to continue in the struggle. And of course, it wasn't that difficult. It was a struggle, but I knew that we were doing the right thing. I always felt that what was happening in Montgomery was part of God's will and purpose. And we were put there to be in the forefront of that struggle. And it wasn't just a struggle relegated to Montgomery, Alabama, the South, but that it had worldwide implications. And I felt really a sense of fulfillment that I hadn't felt before, that this was really what I was supposed to be doing. And it was a great blessing to have discovered this and to be doing what was God's will for your life.
After we were successful in desegregating the buses in Montgomery, the nonviolent revolution we launched in Montgomery spread like a prairie fire across the southern states. My husband led nonviolent protest campaigns against racism and segregation in cities across the South, as well as in Chicago, Cleveland, and other cities in the North. During this time, I had 3 more children and participated in movement activities as much as possible. People ask me how was I able to do this and raise 4 children at the same time. I can only reply that when God calls you to a great task, He provides you with the strength to accomplish what He has called you to do. Faith and prayer, family and friends were always available when I needed them. And of course, Martin and I always were there for each other. I learned that when you are willing to make sacrifices for a great cause, you will never be alone because you will have divine companionship and the support of good people. This same faith and cosmic companionship sustained me after my husband was assassinated and gave me the strength to make my contribution to carrying forward his unfinished work.
Well, it was the belief that we were doing the right thing. Because it had never happened before, it was like, the Supreme Court decision had been rendered in 1954, and this was in 1955. And we were all motivated by that and knowing that this meant the beginning of breaking down the system of segregation. We recognized that if the schools could desegregate, this means that other things can desegregate as well. So with Montgomery happening, it was like an intervention there that God had planted Rosa Parks and also Martin Luther King Jr. And so you had this sense that something very, very significant was happening and that it would have impact beyond, around the world, that we were not only struggling to free the people of the South, but oppressed people around the world. And we had no idea where it was leading, but we had a sense that it was leading to something much more significant than what we were involved in at the time. And each time there was things, for instance, the stabbing incident, where Martin was stabbed in Harlem. I mean, it's like it made no sense, except that God was preparing us for something even bigger. And then when the Nobel Peace Prize came along, which we were rewarded in a sense for our struggles, it was like, but this is still not it, because we have not achieved the peace that he was awarded, the award represented, but we still have a long way to go. So it was always not knowing what the future held, but we knew that we were on the right path, and you had a sense of, as Martin used to say, cosmic companionship, and that kept you going. When I say I was married to the cause, I was married to my husband, whom I loved. I learned to love. It wasn't love at first sight. But I also became married to the cause. It was my cause, and that's the way I felt about it. And so when my husband was no longer there, then I could continue in that cause, and I prayed that God would give me the direction for my life, to give me the strength to do what it was and the ability to do what it was that he had called me to do. And I was trying to seek, what is it that I'm supposed to do now that Martin is no longer here? And I finally determined that it was to develop an institution. I was already involved in building the institution, but I wasn't sure that that was it. Thought maybe it might have been with women, but then, of course, I didn't get that feeling in particular, but always because I thought there was a need to have more women involved in organizing them around as a support group to my husband, and I encouraged him to do that. And he didn't do that in particular. And I thought, well, maybe then that might be what I'm supposed to do. But then I finally determined that it was the King Center, because Martin's message and his meaning was so powerful, and his spirit, I felt, needed to be continued. I mean, I know that people's spirit lived on, but I think in a very positive, meaningful way that young people would know that that influence was being continued. And so I felt that my role then was to develop an institution, to institutionalize his philosophy, his principles of nonviolence, and his methodology of social change. And that's what I have spent my years doing. 27 years I was the president, founder, CEO. I'm still the founder. You're never always the founder. But I retired from that position in 1995, and my son Dexter is now in that position, but I still continue to do all the work that I can to reach as many people as I can with the message. I grew up in the Deep South. It was totally segregated in terms of race. and everything was separate but unequal. I had wonderful parents who inspired me to be the best person that I could be. My mother always told me that I was going to go to college, even if she didn't have one dress to put on. And so I grew up knowing that I was going to somehow find a way out of the situation I grew up in. I grew up on a farm. We were culturally deprived, but we were not poor in the sense that we didn't have very much. We had limited resources because in the country at that time, nobody had very much, and we had probably more than most people.
As an African American child growing up in the segregated South, I was told one way or another almost every day of my life that I wasn't as good as a white child. When I went to the movies with other black children, we had to sit in the balcony while the white kids got to sit in the better seats below. We had to walk to school while the white children rode in school buses paid for by our parents' taxes. Such messages saying we were inferior were a daily part of our lives. But I was blessed with parents who taught me not to let anyone make me feel like it wasn't good enough. And as my mother told me, you are just as good as anyone else. You get an education and try to be somebody, then you won't have to be kicked around by anybody, and you won't have to depend on anyone for your livelihood, not even a man.
Well, my parents taught me some wonderful values that have lasted me, have stayed with me, and I've built on them throughout my life. If it hadn't been for my parents, who I consider heroes, I wouldn't be the kind of person I am. I am very thankful and grateful for them. They're both deceased now. But I went to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And Antioch College, as you probably realize, is a college that teaches people how to have a worldview. And all races were represented at the time and religions. And an excellent education. I had a very broad background, liberal arts, and I had the work experience as well. And Antioch was about making change in society, about social change, which was preparing me at that time for the role that I would play later in life. You know, I was inspired by the words of many persons, and I don't recall right at the moment just which, but the words of, I used to recite a lot of poetry, and I was inspired by the words of Longfellow, "Lives of great men all remind us." You know, even though I was a female, but you know, back then we didn't think of it as male, female as much, but I thought of it, of course that means me too. You know, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime and departing behind us, footprints on the sand of time, and so on. I was inspired by the likes of Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, because I was in high school during the 40s, and of course President Roosevelt was at that time one of my favorite. He was a hero of mine, and I used to love to hear him speak, and I recognized the voice whenever he came on the radio, because we didn't have televisions back then. And I never got to meet Mrs. Roosevelt. Mrs. Mary McLeod Bethune, a black woman who became an advisor to President Roosevelt, and founded a school in Florida, the Bethune-Cookman College, was another great black woman that was a role model for me. My teacher from high school, and then of course there was Paul Robeson, who was a great singer and had such a commanding presence when I first met him and he performed. You know, you could just feel so much power when he walked out on the stage. and his words were so meaningful. Very deep voice, both speaking and singing. You know, it was the way it was. I didn't like it, and I always felt less. I knew I was important as they were, but it sort of brought down a curtain, you know, in a sense, on my selfhood, and helped me to become more determined to get out of that situation and to try to do something about it when I had an opportunity. So I was determined myself to get an education, to get the best education possible, and to be able to come back and give back something to that community. And that was really what I went to college with my mind on, as well as the New England Conservatory of Music. I studied elementary education in music at Antioch, and I couldn't get a full music degree, but I always wanted to study music. That was my first love. In high school, I had a teacher who influenced me greatly, Miss Olive J. Williams, and she was versatile in music, and I wanted to be like her. She exposed me to the world of classical music. Before then, I had never heard classical music. She exposed me also to the great composers of the world, and as well as Black performers, which I didn't know about at the time: Marian Anderson, Paul Robeson, Roland Hayes, and Dorothy Maynard, and others. And so I got my foundation and my beginning there. And then at Antioch, I built on that with another teacher named Walter Anderson. And he was the one who eventually encouraged me to apply, when I graduated from Antioch, to the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. So I attended the New England Conservatory on a scholarship to Antioch, a scholarship to the conservatory. And of course, after my first semester in Boston in 1951, I met Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, Martin Luther King Jr. was studying for his doctorate in systematic theology. And he was going to go back south and pastor a church, a Baptist church. And he was looking for a wife, and I wasn't looking for a husband. But he was a wonderful human being, and he made everyone feel special, and he made me feel very special, you know, as a woman. But I still resisted his overtures, but after he persisted, I had to pray about it, because I've had my parents were religious. I was brought up in the church. And I had a strong faith. I always believed that there was a purpose for my life, and that I had to seek that purpose, and that if I discovered that purpose, then I believed that I would be successful in what I was doing. And I thought I had found that purpose when I decided that music was going to be my career, concert singing. I was going to be trained as a concert singer at the New England Conservatory of Music. I studied voice and the first year, and after I met Martin and prayed about whether or not I should open myself to that relationship, I had a dream, and in that dream I was made to feel that I should allow myself to be open and stop fighting the relationship. And that's what I did, and of course the rest is history. I finished conservatory with a degree in voice and music education, and my second instrument was violin. I started doing concerts when I was a college student, and after we moved to Montgomery, my husband was called to church there, I continued to perform. I performed concerts the first year, got pregnant, had to stop, performed between babies. I have 4 children. And I was doing standard concerts. When I had my 4th child, I realized I could not continue to do that way. And I developed the Freedom Concert concept, where I narrated the story of the civil rights movement that we were involved in, and sang freedom songs in between the narrations that told the story of our struggle from Montgomery to Washington at that time. In 1964, I did my debut with my freedom concert at Town Hall, raised money for the cause, and from the rest of the time, I raised money for my husband's organization, doing freedom concerts across the country and so forth. I think what I've tried to do is to empower people to understand that they can make a difference, and by using the method of nonviolence as a way of life, I mean, it becomes internalized into your life. And so everything that you seek to do, you use those principles and those steps based on those principles and the steps, the methodology, so that if you have a problem, a conflict in whatever it is you're doing, you be able to better resolve that. And if it's dealing with people, you know, certainly you know how to resolve that and become reconciled and to move forward. So today we have many problems that are, some of them are new problems. You have the human rights struggle continuing, but you also have problems like HIV and AIDS, which I think young people have to be dedicated to find ways to deal with these problems, to educate the whole world, because the world as a whole needs education. We have a lot of education that needs to be done here in this country so that people can avoid getting the disease. And of course, we know that people can live with the disease, but there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done there. There are other problems that we're fighting now with the violence. That violence is so pervasive. People have access to guns, and so many people are being killed. I've done a lot of work with the handgun control organization. It's called the Brady Organization now, with Sarah and Jim Brady. There are many things that we can do now to get involved with so many of the causes that are tending to destroy us. And what I think that nonviolence allows you to it allows you to and empowers you to do what is necessary, because what you do is build coalitions. You can't do all of it by yourself, but you can put together coalitions and get other people involved, or join organizations that are already involved and continue to work to eradicate poverty. Of course, this poverty is still with us, very much so. My husband, one of the triple evils that he talked about, poverty, racism, and war. And of course, they all are forms of violence, and we have to continue to work to make sure that people everywhere have a decent livelihood, that they have jobs, they have housing, they have health care, they have quality education, all of these areas that we still have to work on and to improve, so that the quality of life for all people is improved, and we can achieve indeed the beloved community that Martin talked about, that I believe in. No, I never thought that it wasn't the way to go. I guess because of my religious upbringing, and I believed that even though we kind of stray away from it, but you know what is right. I mean, that you've been taught to it was wrong to kill. I believe that firmly. I believe that you have to try to resolve your conflicts without violence. I believe that you have to give something back to society that has nurtured you. And so I never got to the point where I felt that nonviolence was not viable. I just felt that when there was violence, and it came from within, and very seldom violence did come from within, I realized that it wasn't that it wouldn't work. It's that people didn't follow the proper steps in trying to achieve it. Because there are a set of principles and there are a set of steps in the methodology that we were taught about nonviolence. And when we follow those, they work. It may take a while. But in order to have a peaceful solution and a lasting peace, it has to be a nonviolent approach. Well, certainly you have to get the best possible education and training that's available. You have to decide that you need to learn as much about the world and society. And these young people live in a global village, really. Everybody lives in a global village and a global community. I didn't know at the time, I didn't live in a global community, but I had a vision of that I would be living in a global village. I knew I had to be prepared to be comfortable anywhere in the world. That was what my goal was. So these young people are being prepared differently than I was because they live in a different time. But the most important thing they have to decide is not just to get an education and to be selfish about it, but that they must prepare themselves to give back and to make a difference in the world. We have to create what my husband called the beloved community. If we are to survive, we have to learn how to solve our problems and resolve our conflicts in a nonviolent manner. And so I think it's important for them to realize that they have a personal responsibility, each one of them. When I sat in the audience today and I thought about these young people who had gathered, and I thought about how this all came together, I just wish that there were more gatherings such as what we have experienced here at the weekend at the International Achievement Summit. Because if we're going to continue to change society for the better, and if our world is to survive, we've got to invest in these young people in a way so that they know which is the best way and the right way. And I think the Academy is doing a great job.
On March 31st, 1968, just 4 days before Martin was assassinated, as it has been said by Dean Baxter, he delivered his last sermon entitled Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution right here in this cathedral. In the sermon, Martin inspired us with his unshakable faith in the triumph of good over evil. And he said, with this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair the stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discord of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. And so today, I want to challenge you to make a courageous commitment, not only to achieve personal success, but to use your success to help create this beautiful symphony of brotherhood and sisterhood. And if you embrace this challenge with prayer and faith and determination, you will surely succeed. And the 21st century will become a glorious new age of peace and progress for all humankind. May God bless you all and give you the strength to fulfill your dreams. Thank you.
And I come here tonight and plead with you. Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody. As I said to a group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No Kennysonian or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. Don't let anybody take your manhood. Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. There's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure, high, and clean. But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
Now, this is the closing tribute